Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikum salam. How's my audio?
I think it's good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound good.
Okay.
For everyone who has joined in, we're just giving a few minutes before we start off, just having some people ready. And we'll start right at 1, inshallah.
Don't know what that's supposed to mean. Yeah, we're excited for this talk too. Thank you guys for joining us. Inshallah, it's productive and we all learn something.
All right. Oh, you good?
My phone just dropped. Yeah, that's terrible. Okay, we're back.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you for joining, and thank you to everyone who will be watching later on. Just wanted to welcome you to our very first live session, live Q&A with an author. Inshallah, we hope to get a few of these out where we basically talk to the author of an article, get their insights into what they were thinking while they were writing it, maybe some questions that people had about, questions that they had about the article. So to start it off, we're starting off with our Hijab article, Not My Body, Not My Choice, by my fellow board member, Eeman Abbasi. She comes in stepping away from that role of a board member as a writer for a little bit, and really wrote a really great article, mashallah. And we're hoping that she can give some insights in regards to that. So I'll let her take it away.
Great. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Jazakallah khair for joining and, joining us on this new initiative. Like Zain mentioned, it's the first time we're doing something, so please forgive any shortcomings we may have. Okay, so Bismillah, Allahumma salli wa sallam ala Sayyidina wa Habibina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I wanted to kind of just take the first portion of this live to kind of discuss what I was thinking when I was writing this piece, and what were some of the main themes that were covered. So one of the biggest topics that I address in this piece is this idea of liberalism, right? And for those who may be unfamiliar, liberalism was a ideology that started really in the 17th century by an English philosopher called John Locke. He really pushed this idea that man as an individual has certain inalienable rights, things like the right to property, freedom of speech, and unlike other type of philosophical movements, if you look at Greek classics like Plato or Aristotle, who were different, of course, from an Islamic philosophy, if you will, they still had some type of orientation towards a ultimate reality or greater purpose. Whereas liberalism really didn't have that, right? The biggest orientation that existed for, the liberal pursuit, if you will, is this yearning and this pursuit for freedom, freedom for the sake of freedom. And so man really becomes an island in this way. And we see that individualism really becomes a very natural offshoot of this ideology. We also see that things like feminism, secularism, materialism, all these different isms that we really tackle at Traversing Tradition really are birthed out of this Enlightenment project that starts with people like John Locke, Adam Smith, who writes about the relationship between liberalism and economics, and many of these types of philosophers. So when we look at things like secularism in particular, we see how this Christian understanding of religion that creates a dichotomy between the private devotional, salvational affairs of an individual is separate from the public organization of a society. And that's a dichotomy that we don't really see in Islam. Liberalism, secularism, all of these isms really divorce us from the relationships that we have with others. So whether that's, vertical relationships, horizontal relationships that we have with fellow creation, with other man or woman responding to the types of rights and responsibilities that they have over us and that we owe to them. And then also these type of like vertical relationships of yearning for some greater purpose, some ultimate reality, or in our case, towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so having been divorced from both these horizontal relationships and these vertical relationships, man becomes an island, and his truths, his choices, and his desires really are the most important thing. And so what I wanted to do in this article is just explore how this idea of liberalism influences Islam. And I took instajabis, if you will, these hijabi influencers as a case study. They are not the only ones who have internalized liberalism. A lot of us unconsciously have, but in this article, it was just a case study. So, I explore how instead of framing their decisions as a matter of taqwa or iman in terms of removing their hijabs, it's really about them citing their own truth, listening to their own heart, and making God irrelevant in the equation. And so, yeah, I'll go into that further, but I guess that's really our postmodern condition, is making truth irrelevant, where everyone speaks their own truth, and in the end, truth has no meaning. Everyone has their own understanding of how we arrive at truth. So that's kind of what I explore, right? Is how does that type of rhetoric affect the relationships that we have with one another, and then also the relationship we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ultimately.
I mean, that was great. Great explanation and introduction into basically the overview of what you talked about in the article. And I encourage everyone to check it out if they haven't already. So we can get right into it then, inshallah, all these questions that we collected. So I'll start with the first one. If the hijab actively resists a capitalistic and political project, then is it not a political statement? And if it is political, then shouldn't we articulate how that politics addresses the concerns of the original slogan, "My body, my choice"?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And I kind of referred to this earlier, how Islam is different from many other religions like Christianity or Buddhism that enjoyed a type of natural divide between the private devotional acts of an individual and the public responsibilities or organization of a society. So there isn't this type of demarcation of this is a private affair and that's a public affair. Everything, if you will, is political if it relates to the organization of people. But if we think about political in terms of progressive or liberal versus conservative, or Republican versus Democrat, those type of dichotomies, those type of labels really don't apply to Islam. And what we're seeing is that, unfortunately, in the US in particular, but increasingly all over the world, hijab has been tokenized in this way, where just wearing the hijab kind of confers some type of alliance or agreement with progressive norms or the Democratic Party. Particularly, I think we saw this after Trump's inauguration. There was this very popular cartoon or image that was populated of a hijabi, and just, sorry, my phone is dropping. Just this idea of how wearing a hijab inherently makes you a Democrat or inherently makes you someone in line with progressive norms. In that way, it's not a political statement, right? That's not the purpose of hijab. But it is a political statement in terms of being a public affirmation of faith, a public affirmation of the fact that you submit only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, sure, I guess in that way, if you want to think of it as being political, okay. But in terms of politics, how we understand it in a very day-to-day way, that's not the case here.
For sure, yeah. It's really important that we don't limit that. So on to the next question. How do we differentiate between advising about the hijab and judging others, given that this conversation is about, people unveiling, people taking off the hijab or having a wildly different view of what the hijab actually entails or what it is?
Yeah, I think this is a tricky one. So this is a problem that we face not just with hijab, it's a problem with any type of ibadah, right? And then just in terms of like how we give nasiha in general. So I think, one thing that's super important is making sure you have a relationship with the person you're trying to advise. It doesn't really make sense to give unsolicited advice to someone you don't know, have never met, have never spoken to, even if they are a celebrity or a public figure. I see, in the comment sections of a lot of these public personalities, how people will, tell them, oh, you're going to hell, or, oh, you are, sinning, you are a fitna, you are XYZ. I mean, that is not advice. No one in their right mind would agree that that's some type of proper nasiha. And we really want to make sure that when we are, fulfilling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's request or command of us to enjoin good and forbid evil, that we're doing it from a place of mercy and of love, and not a place of, being vindictive or being, being just aggressive and unnecessarily like pushing people away from the deen. Yeah, merciful. And so I think that is the most important thing, is like if you have people in your immediate family who struggle with hijab, just making sure that you're kind of cultivating an environment of taqwa first, of God consciousness, and then worrying about these things that become easier once you have taqwa, right? It becomes much easier to wear hijab or pray 5 times a day or to read Quran regularly when you love the beloved and you want to do anything that the beloved asks of you. And so that's what we're really missing in our community is we're missing that type of love and that mercy. And we're really, really quick to pass moral judgments on people, on their salvation, on the position that they'll be in the afterlife. And may God protect us from that, because that is not something that any of us should ever be doing. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's not just limited to hijab. It's like a really big problem that we have throughout our community, is like we're not rooted in love when we speak to each other. We're not rooted in empathy. And you'll know what the difference between sincere advice and judgment is when you act from a place of love. And, judgment, I don't know, people will cite this, like, I think it's a Tupac lyric, right, Zayn, of like, only God can judge me, right? Like people have brought this into deen, and ultimately, like, we know that we shouldn't be casting these moral judgments on other people, but we do recognize at the same time how people act has effects on us, because like I mentioned, we are a very communal society, a very communal, worldview, if you will. We have obligations to fellow creation, and the decisions that you make affect your brothers and your sisters. They affect all of us. So it's not enough for us to just say, live and let be, just let people do what they want to do. We do have really huge obligations to one another, to advise one another, but again, do it from a place of love.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think people get lost in that and think their love is very aggressive. So it comes off the wrong way, or they just think that this is the way to get it done. So yeah, it's important to really emphasize that. So then, is it wrong then to say that choice is not important in Islam? Shouldn't we be doing things based on intention?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there are hadiths about this. This is something that we know very well in our tradition, that intentions, our actions are judged by our intentions, that we need to be very mindful of what our intent is. But I think we also need to be mindful of when we submit to the religion, when we submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we've made an intention there to honor what He's said to us, right? To honor what He's asked of us, to love Him in the way that He deserves to be loved and worship Him in the way that He deserves to be worshipped. And so, sure, we have a choice in terms of whether we choose to be Muslim or whether we choose to follow, Islamic injunctions, but recognize that these choices have consequences, that your choices do not supersede Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will, and they do not preclude you or keep you from reaping what you sow, basically. And I think this is something that is very uncomfortable for people to recognize, that there will be consequences not just in this material world, but in the next world as well, that there are metaphysical consequences for our actions, and that while we celebrate the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us free will, part of that is submitting to Him and worshiping Him as He has, as He deserves to be, as He commands us to worship Him. And again, this should come from a place of taqwa, of God consciousness. I think there's a separate discussion to be had about, in an Islamic state or under Islamic governance, is it correct for, the ruler to mandate certain Islamic injunctions? I think that's a really separate conversation. I don't know if that's what this person was referring to in asking the question, in terms of should we have a choice? Should things like forced hijab be mandatory, let's say in places like Iran? I really think that's a separate conversation, because we don't have any country in the world right now that actually follows Sharia properly, is some type of Islamic government. And so all we can do right now is focus on our local communities, on our families. That's what's most important. So I guess, yes, you have a choice, but remember that those choices have consequences. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, absolutely. So on to the next question. So given that this article was a response about, Insta-jabbies, as you mentioned before, so what advice would you have for hijabis in general when an influencer removes their hijab? So and there's a few other questions that are tallied onto this. So should hijab be viewed as a personal obligation or one with communal undertones? What is the role of men in this conversation? And what do men misunderstand about hijabis? So if you need me to repeat any of those, just let me know.
Okay. Yeah, let me take one by one. So
Sure.
the first was how should people respond to Instajabis taking off their hijabs, right?
What advice do you have for hijabis specifically when an influencer removes their hijab?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, we would not be influenced by the decisions that these celebrities or these public personalities make. That's not the reality. I think particularly for young Muslim women, we like to fit in, we like to look beautiful, we like to fit the norm of what beauty and success are. And actually, I think this is true for men as well. It just manifests differently a bit. But, ideally we wouldn't be influenced, but we have to remember, and this is something that I write about in the article, the very career description or their job position is an influencer, right? These individuals exist to influence us. So when they say things like, I've made a personal decision to make off my hijab, but I don't want my decision to affect what you're doing or to influence you, that's absurd. That doesn't make any sense, because it's their job description to influence people, and they can't secularize the faith in this way where they only influence us on matters of beauty or on shoe styles or on makeup or on these superficial things, but they don't influence us on how we view ourselves and our deen and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't work like that. Influence is all encompassing. That's something I write in the article. So we need to be confident, I think, in our deen first. When you have a really strong foundation in your deen, you know what is haq and what is batil, what is right and what is wrong. And although there will be these waves from society to kind of confront you, to shake you, you have that anchor of the religion. You have that personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that keeps you grounded regardless of what people around you are doing. And unfortunately, like, it seems that people don't have that. And so when things like this happen, you know, when someone they look up to makes a decision that confuses them or perplexes them, it shakes them up. You know, it
Yeah.
rocks them off course. And so I think this should be a good wake up call for us, you know, of have we learned our religion? Have we learned it in a proper way? Are we connected to the ulama? Are we connected with people who celebrate Islam as it should be, who love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as he should be? And, you know, if we are so affected by these things, again, it should be a wake up call and we should return back to the tradition in that way. So my advice would be like to any like girls or even women who feel really hurt. And I use that word particularly because I've seen in a lot of the comments, a lot of these young women are saying that they feel betrayed, they feel let down, they feel as if like they feel genuinely like sad, upset. And I can empathize with that. Like when I first heard the news of these various people taking their hijabs off, like I felt that sadness as well. And I think that is something that we should feel because it's our family, right? The ummah is
Mm-hmm.
one family. And when one of us kind of maybe goes off the path a bit, we should feel sorrow at that. And so, you know, to the people who are mocking these girls who feel betrayed, who feel sad and saying, you know, why were you taking your deen from these instajabis in the first place? You know, why were you tying your hopes up with them? I mean, I don't think that's a very empathetic response. I don't think it's very productive to tell people you shouldn't feel sad because they do, because they see these people as their sisters or role models. But again, I think like if we have a strong sense of self, if we know who we are, if we know what our tradition is, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks of us, inshallah, we'll have the type of moral courage and, you know, that type of strength to get through these things. Yeah.
Sure. So the second prong of this question, and in the same breath, someone also mentioned it earlier in the comments. So should hijab be viewed as a personal obligation or one with communal undertones? And the question that, you know, a sister asked inside the comments is, like, how is one's hijab the personal, you know, sense of worship? How does that affect an entire community if one individual takes it off within that same breath?
Yeah, so any of our ibadah, right? Things like prayer, like salah, Quran, zakat, these things have both personal and communal implications. So, for example, things like salah, right? Or like prayer. That is a conversation, if you will, a personal conversation that you are having with your creator. It is a time for you to cut off from thoughts of this world and to really focus on this vertical relationship that you have. But at the same time, there's a huge communal aspect of it as well. When we pray in Jama'at, when we pray with our brothers or sisters and we stand shoulder to shoulder with them, there is that social aspect to it as well. Same thing with zakat, right? It is a personal requirement for you to pay that and for you to fulfill that, but it has communal implications as well, right? It puts money back into the system. It, you know, it has these communal implications. And so I think the same way with hijab, right? Hijab is one, a personal fulfillment of the requirement Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon us in terms of having this type of ibadah. But then at the same time, one of the reasons Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cites as or one of the benefits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cites for hijab, I should say, is that it differentiates Muslim women from non-believing women. And I think there is that communal aspect, right? That when you look out into the world, you can identify who Muslim women are. And there is that visual reinforcement of the fact that there are women and men, of course, who have divorced themselves from any other type of chains that the material world may try to cast upon them, that they are not these slaves to capitalism or to any of these other ideologies, that they are, only, exclusively servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so there is that communal and that individual role there. I think in general, of course, it helps when you have, fellow sisters who wear hijab alongside with you. It's nice to have friends who kind of are on the same boat. And so that's something that's really wonderful as well.
Sure, for sure. So then into the next prong of this question, what is the role of men in this conversation?
Okay, I think this is an interesting question. So I personally am not a fan of the gender wars that kind of seem to be controlling popular discourse right now. I think that it really is a manifestation again of individualism, that we see men and women living very distinct lives with distinct or different experiences that the other person or the opposite gender cannot relate to. I don't think that is how it should be, right? We should be mindful of the fact that these are our brothers or these are our sisters, and that we have rights and responsibilities to one another. When liberalism emphasizes man's rights, it says that man has these inalienable rights without emphasizing who is responsible for fulfilling these rights, right? So that part of the equation is really absent of who is it who's fulfilling these rights. Mm-hmm. Islam doesn't really do that, right? We emphasize the fact that, of course, men and women have their rights, but it's the other person, it's the other gender, perhaps, who is going to fulfill them. So for every right, there is a corresponding responsibility that comes with it, and that emphasis on responsibility is completely absent in liberalism, in a liberal system. There's no discussion on who fulfills that responsibility. So I think for men, we need to, I'm not a man, so I can't speak to this, but I think as women, we need to recognize that, our actions do affect men, and men, you need to recognize that your actions do affect women. So when I talk about things like our body being a trust and being an amana and being a divine creation, that our bodies are sacred, right? That doesn't just mean that women have to cover their bodies. It also means that men have to refrain from gazing at them, that they have to cover their eyes, if you will. They have to cover their mouths, their ears. What are they consuming through these five senses? That is part of honoring the amana as well. That's part of the trust as well that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed on us. That's the part that men need to focus on. Of course, there is the hijab, the physical hijab that men need to do of, covering, let's say, up to their knees or including their knees or their navel or etc. These are fiqh discussions that, of course, men do have a physical hijab in that way. But I think more importantly is stressing the lowering of the gaze, lowering, of our tongue, of how we speak and think about women. That's the role of men, right? Is making sure that we can trust men as qawam, that we feel comfortable in their company, that we feel honored in their company, that it's not difficult for us. And I think I would be remiss if I did not mention the fact that these influencers who post these beautiful selfies or shapes of their body or these very sexualized images, even though they are covered, they do so, and they're able to do so because they have a market for that. And that market is not just Muslim women who like to see beautiful women and like getting ideas on how to wrap their hijab. It's also because there's a market of men who are engaging with those posts. And so I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. And so men, please be mindful of this. And I don't need to be the one to say this. Zain, I think as a man, you can speak to this probably much better than I can. I don't know if you want to add something there.
Yeah, for sure. The market exists. It takes two to tango, basically, in terms of, this whole aspect of encouraging this type of influencer culture that really goes against the idea of hijab for both men and women, right? A lot of times we focus on what women are doing and what they're doing wrong, but we're not really focusing on who's giving that attention, who's fueling that that whole movement, you know. So it's really important, number one, as men like myself and others, to you know, be consistent in when they lower their gaze, how they, you know, interact with women, things like that. Inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. And I think in general, like, I think there was a question that I had read earlier that was like, if we have sisters or daughters who don't wear hijab, you know, how do we navigate this conversation? I think this is again related to what I said earlier of how we need to focus on cultivating taqwa first, cultivating strong love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. I am not married. I don't have kids. Inshallah, one day I'll be able to speak to that specifically. But I think, like, as a child, right, like someone who has parents, I think something that really worked is like the emphasis was on love first. And when you love someone, you'll do anything for them. You'll do what they ask. And so when we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we love our beloved, we'll follow through. And so make it easy for people in your family, in your community to love him. Yeah, and for the women who may be struggling with this, again, like, I'm not a sheikha, I'm not an alima, I'm not any type of expert or scholar. I am only speaking from my personal experiences, just sharing some personal reflections I have. For women who are struggling with this, with the idea of hijab, start somewhere. Make the intention that inshallah one day you will fulfill hijab or fulfill whatever the type of ibadah is in the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked you to do so. And then make active efforts every single day towards getting to that. So if you don't wear hijab right now, just say, like, okay, one day of the week I will, or when I hang out with my Muslim friends I will, or when I go grocery shopping I will. Start somewhere and have that intention that inshallah you will be exactly where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to be. But don't psych yourself out from saying, oh, I can't do it perfectly, so I'm not going to do it at all. None of us go from 0 to 100. It's just not possible. It's not realistic for many of us. Maybe, you know, I'm sure there are people out there who, mashallah, have this talent of going from 0 to 100 in anything they do. But for most of us who are weak and vulnerable and very, very fallible, it's not possible for us to go from 0 to 100. So be easy on yourself. And to the brothers as well, you know, I see this all the time in the comment section. It is absolutely inappropriate and absolutely terrible to tell a woman, you know, if you're not going to wear a hijab, if you're not going to wear it properly, don't wear it at all. Absolutely inappropriate. You should never, ever say something like that. You would never say that to someone who was, let's say, only praying one prayer a day, who only came to Jummah. You would never tell them, don't come to Jummah. You never pray any other prayer. You would never say that. So please, you know, please to refrain.
Some people would.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, that's because
yeah,
we have no love and no mercy in our communities anymore. And then we're shocked when people leave. Like, why are we shocked? There's no reason to be shocked. This is what we're doing. We're pushing people away.
for sure. Yeah, and just remember, in that same breath about progress. Progress isn't linear either. You might fall, you might continue. It'll be like a heartbeat, right? That shouldn't demotivate you. It can be tough sometimes, but in any aspect of the deen, just use that motivation that you have, and just remember that you're not always going to be completely going up the entire time, right? We all struggle. We're all human. So the last prong of this question is, what do men misunderstand about hijabis?
Okay, so again, like, I'm not a man, alhamdulillah, so I can't speak about that specifically, but from what I have heard, and I did a little bit of market research within our team to understand what misconceptions men may have about women, or hijabis in particular, it seems as if some Muslim men may believe that hijabis are very shy, very submissive, very quiet, unconfrontational. That's not true. Sorry, that's not the reality. I think other men, especially if a man has never had sisters, He may believe that women are perfect, that we always look dolled up, that we never smell bad, that we never use the bathroom, that we never have this like full range of human emotion, which we do, obviously. We are human and we experience the same highs and lows and the same type of emotions that men experience, and we struggle against our desires and our nafs in the same way that men, do. Well, I shouldn't say exactly the same, but in a very similar way that men do. So just remembering, like, have mercy for your sisters. We're not perfect. Let me dissuade you of that impression if there are any men who believe women are perfect. And women, we know men are not perfect. So inshallah, that is well known. But I think, yeah, just like remembering that they're human and that there's no one personality type that any hijabi fits. Hijab is an act of ibadah. Bring up any misconceptions that people may have or guys may have. Please do so, because I don't really know. I'm not a guy. I don't know what you guys think about hijabis.
Yeah, at least within the circles I've been, that seems to be like what you pretty much hit it on the nail for a lot of guys, what they think. Um, I really don't really have much to add. Your research went well on that.
Yeah.
Um, so, the final question that we have written down, we might get a few more from the comments that we have, if we have the time. But how has the response been to your article so far, and do you plan on expanding on some of the points in the future?
Yeah, definitely. SubhanAllah, like the response to the article has been very overwhelming. I did not expect it, and I'm honestly very, very honored and humbled that so many people have taken the time to read it and to engage with it critically, and to take what I said seriously, because that is an honor, and I'm not an expert in any regard. And so, like, thank you for listening to what I had to say in that piece. Some of the questions that remain, I think, for me, having written that piece is, where do we go from here, right? Of what needs to happen next. And like I wrote, hijabis and influencers are only one part of this equation. They are only one part of this conversation about how overwhelmingly the way we view our religion is changing in modernity, right? That everyone has suddenly the right to declare their own truth and to believe that their truth supersedes all other truths, especially Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's haqq, or his truth, or what he has told us. And that, it's not just how we view things like hijab, it's things like, is prayer mandatory? Is drinking alcohol permissible? Is capitalism a real system for us? Is there a place for us in Islamic feminism? Like, all of these bigger questions, I think, come out of this idea, and how liberalism is reshaping the way we think, right? It's reshaping the tools that we have, the critical thinking skills that we use. It's reshaping what we put value on, whether we have an ultimate purpose, whether we're working towards a higher reality. So it's reshaping all of these things. I think one of the biggest things that I want to cover, maybe inshallah, in a follow-up piece, is this idea of having a productive Islamic or Muslim culture, right? A dynamic Muslim culture where people don't feel the need to kind of submit to capitalism or capitalistic ideas of success, because they have an alternative culture that they can find success through. They have alternative goals and pursuits that they can aim for. So I don't know if our community is really willing or is really capable right now of having that type of frank discussion of what we need to do to build those institutions, to build a thriving alternative culture. I think the phrase is, and I'm not a baller, I'm not particularly athletic, but I think the phrase here is like, the best defense is a good offense, right? So we need to have a good offense. I think one of the biggest problems right now is that we are perpetually playing catch up. So we see a problem in the community and then we just respond to it, and we refute it, and we have these like very petty sectarian or aqidah debates, or just like really issues that do not affect the day reality of most Muslims. That's kind of what we're stuck in, right? Is this like refutation culture. And we need to get beyond that. We need to be building institutions that are that offense, that people can look to, and can see, okay, Islam offers a beautiful aesthetic that is so inviting, that is so rich and dynamic, that I don't feel the need to kind of engage or submit to this capitalistic, materialistic, dominant monoculture, you know? And I think this is true for both men and women. This is not a problem that uniquely affects women, that only women are vulnerable to. This is a problem that men experience too, whether they believe that, you know, fancy cars and flashy gadgets and all of these things are the peak of success, that is all we kind of aim for, or having, you know, like a beautiful trophy wife or a 7-digit salary. Like that's all that matters in life. That's not true. You know, that's what the monoculture kind of expects of us and convinces us is what we should be working towards, and that should not be the case. So that's something that I want to explore in a follow-up piece, is how do we kind of work towards institution building? What's the role of ulama in that? What's the role of lay Muslims like myself in that? What is the role of these decision makers, if you will, in our society? So people who are not influencers in terms of like, you know, Instajabis or social media personalities, but influencers in terms of like policymakers, academics. Like, how do we all kind of fit into this equation of building a thriving, you know, dynamic Muslim culture? And why have we really stagnated in this regard?
For sure. All right. So that's it for the questions that we had written down. I'll take a couple that were in the comments. I'll display this one real quick. So do you think those who were moved are internalizing Islamophobia to a certain degree?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak on anyone's specific intentions on why they take the hijab off. All I can comment on is what they themselves cite as reasons. So it could be possible that, you know, some Muslim women do believe that hijab holds them back, that hijab is oppressive, that, you know, hijab has no place in the modern world, that they've kind of outgrown the need for hijab, that, you know, this idea that you can be modest without the hijab. I mean, again, like, we don't wear hijab. The primary reason is not because of modesty. The primary reason is because God said so. You know, like, we need to be more comfortable with those 3 words, God said so. That's the reason. Like, write it down, you know? And then the secondary reasons, or those secondary consequences, are exactly that, secondary. So it may be that there are some women who have internalized this, and I wouldn't be surprised when the dominant narrative, again, is that liberation comes through unveiling. And this is a colonial hangover. This is an imperial hangover. This is an assault, again, on the way we view ourselves and the way we view our tradition. We can see throughout history how there were efforts to convince Muslim societies that that Muslim men are oppressive and aggressive, and that Muslim women are weak and vulnerable and need protection, particularly from the non-Muslim white man, right? This white savior complex of, you know, invading Afghanistan, for example, to save the Afghan women from their oppressive Afghan husbands. I mean, I think this is something that continues today. So sure, I wouldn't be surprised if there are women out there who think that the hijab is oppressing them. Again, like, I wish it were not so. I think people realized like how beautiful it is to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there are like 101 influences and attempts to pull you away, that there are 101 things that will try to capture your attention and capture your loyalty and allegiance, whether that's a nation state, whether that's an economic system, whether that's a political philosophy or ideology. But Islam liberates us from all of that and provides only one path, the straight path, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one, and that's all that we need. And there's so much beauty and liberation to be found there. And so if we make these appeals like my body, my choice, speaking my own truth, listening to my heart, because we think that it's going to give us some type of equality or liberation, or freedom in this society, we're really fooling ourselves. It's really not going to, it's only going to chain us even further. So let's be mindful of that, and let's really try to break away from that.
Absolutely. All right. So the last one, it kind of goes into another topic, but I think it's a great way to, end it and explore another topic potentially in the future. So what does this instant influencer phenomenon tell us about the type, the need of female role models in general, specifically, of course, for Muslim women?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge void in the market, if you will, for positive Muslim role models. I think there, of course, it shouldn't even be like people like us speaking on. It really should be ulama who are leading this conversation. And the only reason I'm even here or we even exist is because I don't think ulama are following these instajabis or really have their pulse on what's going on in that world. And so we're kind of here to fill that gap. But in an ideal world, we would have a lot of female Muslim role models who are classically and traditionally trained in the religion. I think if people want like a specific example, one of my favorite sheikhas is Sheikha Aisha Prime. She's at NYU right now. She's been classically and traditionally trained. She gets the American context, like she gets it, right? She gets what we face in the West. She speaks so beautifully, mashallah. She is so articulate and intelligent and merciful in the way that she speaks. And so I think like she's a great role model if people are looking for someone in particular to learn from. And then I think also like, as women, it's nice to have female role models who kind of understand the specific problems that we may face, but that shouldn't preclude us or bar us from learning from male Muslim scholars, particularly if they are more accessible. Go out and try to learn from them anyways, and you'll find that a lot of them are either married to sheikhs or scholars in their own rights who are willing to teach you and have a connection with you, but maybe are not as public as their husbands may be, or they have connections to other people that they can facilitate. So don't let that be an obstacle for you, because again, like we are one family. And just the fact that like Zain, for example, we were discussing, like we have Zain kind of moderating this discussion on hijab, and is this like a female only conversation? Like, do men really have a place in this conversation? And I think, yeah, absolutely. Like both genders need to be part of this conversation and part of the path forward. So learn from whoever you can, learn from, seek this positive women in your lives, and then try to be them. I think that's the biggest thing for me right now is like, I definitely had a stage where I was super sad and depressed about the fact that I couldn't find women to learn from and to be in the company of. But all you can do is kind of like change your own reality. You can't really change everyone around you. So try to be that positive role model for your younger sisters. And inshallah, like over time, things will change. And alhamdulillah, like there is a lot of energy right now to get a lot of Muslim women into the public eye in this way, to get a lot of female ulama, out there. So inshallah, things will change in the next few years. I'm hopeful.
Inshallah. Yeah, it's good to have that that optimism about it, and the change starts within ourselves as individuals. To really, especially helping out with the following generation, inshallah. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank everyone who will tune in later. This will be posted onto IGTV at the Traversing Tradition Instagram page. It'll be shared on Twitter. Be sure to follow us on Twitter if you don't already. To sign up for our emails at the website at traversingtradition.com. Read our other articles as well. Read this one if you haven't already. I hope this gave like a good insight into Eeman's article and what's to come, inshallah. yeah, and you can reach out to us anytime. I'm on Twitter. Eeman is currently on a hiatus from Twitter, but she has access to the email, and if you want to contact her, I'm sure she has her methods.
Yeah, people can people can reach out to me through email or through Instagram, inshallah. I think those will be the best ways.
For sure.
And if there's any, and I really just want to stress this fact that like I'm not an expert. And so if you disagree with anything that I said, please do not hesitate to let me know and to correct me. I will be very, very humbled to receive that type of correction from you because that's the only way that I can learn is if people more knowledgeable than me reach out. So please, don't hesitate and we can, if you have questions about anything I said, we can continue that conversation, inshallah.
Yeah, we as an organization love critique. You can't get anywhere without it. You can't improve without it. We would be nowhere without, people letting us know about something that we did wrong or something that they disagree with. We welcome it. Inshallah, it's an open forum. We're not authoritative in any means. So yeah, thank you again, guys. Jazakallah khairan for logging on. And be sure to follow our other work. We have more of these in store, inshallah, and more content coming your way, inshallah. So thank you. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, everyone.